Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Firstly, before we kickstart formally, I just wanted to say that we do have a Q&A chat box as part of this webinar. So if you do have any questions throughout, please feel free to pop them into that Q&A box, and we'll either answer them throughout or jump on them at the end. So today we're going to be chatting about COVID safe plans, and I'm aware that there's been a lot of challenges for businesses over the last couple of months, particularly in the tourism and events sector, and trying to get your businesses back up and running has been really critical over these last couple of weeks. And we're pleased to see that we've got some COVID safe guidelines to help you do so, because that does not only give your businesses some confidence in how you can reopen, but also helps to reassure our customers in getting them back in through your doors as well. So today I'm joined with QTIC Chief Executive Daniel Gschwind. So thank you for joining us today, Daniel. Daniel is, I suppose, the expert, I guess, on COVID safe plans, which I bet you never thought you would say, but Daniel's and his team have been working really hard on getting those COVID safe plans out to the industry and making sure that we've got the connections that we need to get you guys the advice that you need to get your businesses back up and running as well. So Daniel, we might kickstart, and I'm sure everyone on the chat has at some point had a look at their tourism COVID safe plans for their businesses. But are you able to give a bit of a highlight as to what is a COVID safe plan? Do all tourism businesses need one? And why are they so important?
Well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you everybody on the phone or on the Zoom meeting here today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I was actually in Townsville, as some of you may know, last week, which was very nice to get out and come and actually visit some places again. It was a brief visit, but nevertheless, it was great to be up in Townsville and now to connect with you here this way is great. Lisa, as you said, having to become a inverted commas health expert was certainly not what I expected earlier this year. And like all of us, we're suddenly throwing around words we never thought we would, you know, social distancing and various hygiene measure words. And who would have thought, you know, but here we are, we have to adapt and adopt new ways of doing things. And that's what we had to do in this case. And as an organization, QTIC was asked by the Queensland government some months ago now to help facilitate that link between the health advice and the health provisions that are being implemented and an industry that tried to come to grips with what they were meant to be doing. And it was a little bit a case of universes colliding. We have, you know, the tourism industry and tourism operators very good at what they do, but not necessarily health experts. And we have the whole health apparatus, Queensland Health and other people associated with it, and the chief health officer at the top of it all, trying to understand what the tourism industry needed or had to deal with. And that wasn't as straightforward as it might sound. And when we took on the task given to us by the Queensland government of preparing this plan, this industry plan, we didn't probably quite appreciate how complex a task this was. And it was not an easy journey, I have to say. I think a few of us here and elsewhere developed a few extra grey hairs. We very early in the piece, of course, we knew we didn't have the health expertise, so we engaged with several very eminently qualified health experts at Mater Health, who worked with us diligently over that last 6 weeks, 8 weeks nearly has been that. But it wasn't a project where you could just say, this is what we're going to deliver, we're doing it, we have a consultant. It was far more complicated than that, because we had to obviously involve the Department of Tourism, Premier's Department, Queensland Health, and people were rotating out of these different roles. It was very difficult to keep track of it. But I'm pleased to say that the end result was probably more useful in the end than we thought. May not be apparent to you out there or operators who for the first time look at this document and wonder how complicated it is perhaps, or how ill-defined some things are. I appreciate that. But what I can say to all of you with some confidence is that that plan, or this plan for our industry, for tourism experiences and accommodation, has carved out more flexibility for operators than pretty much any other industry plan that we're aware of that has been developed. That hasn't been an easy feat, particularly because we're dealing with so many different settings and contexts, as you obviously well know. Yep. We were told gradually, oh, now you have to also cover balloon rides, and you have to cover snorkeling and every other circumstance that tourists might find themselves in. And to put that all under a single hat, as it were, was not that simple. So what we have achieved with this plan, I think, is to create more flexibility than was feared at one point. And if you lament the fact that something's unspecific enough in the plan when you read it, that's for a good reason. It's to give you more flexibility. That's why there are sort of vague words in there sometimes, such as wherever possible, you should do this. And that is so precisely so that you as an operator can actually get around this, for lack of a better word, and deem it not possible to do a particular social distancing measure when you have, for instance, I'm just making this up now, people in a dinghy transferring them from the main vessel to the shore or something like that. So in a nutshell, we try to circumvent the most stringent social distancing rules to make it possible for more operators, particularly in the transport part, to actually operate. So the one person per 4 square meter rule, which is a universal rule in Queensland and to some extent most other states, that was the big stumbling block for us. And we were able, to a degree at least, to get around that by saying, in a nutshell, that with 1.5 meter distancing, if you make that possible, you can have more than one person per 4 square meters. Look, I'm getting into the details a bit, and I'm sorry about that, but that is the nub of the flexibility that has been put into our plan.
It certainly would have been a mammoth task, Daniel, and I know the amount of questions that we were getting into the lead-in of that being launched, and the concerns from industry, particularly around that one person per 4 square metre. That would have wiped businesses out if we couldn't find a way around that. So credit to your team for getting that through, and for delivering a plan which is so versatile for so many different types of businesses and intricate situations, I suppose. So just with regards to those plans, is it anticipated that every tourism business aligned to that plan, or is there businesses that would fit outside of that need to do their own thing? What's the expectation for businesses to align to it?
If we look at the entire tourism sector, whilst we initially thought we had to literally cover the whole thing, we then gradually realized or found out that restaurants and cafes are covered by their own industry plan, which was developed by Restaurant and Catering Australia. So that covers, as I said, restaurants and cafes. And the pubs and clubs are covered by their own plan, which was developed by the Queensland Hotels Association. So those businesses that fall into those categories will have to look at those plans to understand where they stand. Everybody else, any business for that matter, not just tourism, can operate under the general health directive. So they can say, okay, fine, I'll stick with the one person per 4 square meter rule, for instance, and I do all the other things that the general health directives suggests. But if, as a tourism business, for instance, to use some of those alternative measures to be more flexible, or if they want to have greater numbers in certain settings, then they will have to make sure they literally tick the boxes that are available through this plan. That's what they would have to do, yes.
And they don't have to submit anything, do they, using that plan and ticking those boxes? It's self-regulated, that's correct?
That is correct. So you have to take it seriously to the extent that you have to actually look through what you're promising to do. And you have to, there's a template attached to the plan, a Word document that you can use to write in very simple terms, that's what you're doing, or that's how you're approaching this. And that document, if you are referring to the plan, that you will have to be able to make available to a potential inspector. I mean, we don't know if anybody will come and inspect anything, but it is possible that an agency, the police or somebody might challenge you and say, well, how come you have that many people here? And in that case, you would have to say, well, I'm following this plan, and under the provisions of the plan, I have put these measures in place. I've signed it. It's here. You don't have to send it anywhere. You just have to have it.
Have it on hand, yeah, and probably a good idea to share it, share some of the initiatives you're doing in your business with your customer base as well, so they've got some confidence to get back through those doors of those businesses as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, look, I think that is a very important aspect, and there's the regulatory side where we try to sort of do the right thing by what the government asks us to do. That's just complying with regulation, and so that's for that audience, for the government audience. But as you suggest, Lisa, I think the far more important challenge for us longer term is to reassure our customers that we actually know what we're doing. I mean, and I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you're not aware of yourself. I mean, we've had a media diet for the last 3 months of disaster and scaring everybody witless that they're going to die if they touch anything or come too close to anybody. So that's the kind of audience we're now dealing with. And as service providers, certainly in tourism, but elsewhere as well, we have to be able to respond to that.
Yeah.
Demonstrate that we're thinking of their safety. And all the surveys I've seen, and there have been multiple, I'm sure you've seen some of them. I had one yesterday, as a matter of fact, that suggested that at least half of would-be travelers consider health and safety as the number one determinant on whether they're going to a certain venue or not. That's the number one thing to think about. We know that's always been, safety, well-being has always been relatively high on the list of considerations. Although we haven't talked about it so much in the past, now it's front and center. And
absolutely,
explicitly or implicitly, a tourism operator has to be able to say to their customers, we're okay, you're going to be okay, we're looking after our staff, we know what we're doing. So getting that message out to your customers is pretty important.
Yeah, and we'll talk soon just about some ways that businesses might be able to do that as well. I have had a question come through the chat, Daniel, and I know that there's some questions. I have had a couple of questions offline about this one as well. Festivals and events, and also zoos and aquariums, do they fit within the current plan that you've got, or is there another plan to be released on these topics?
So, right, there's questions in there, I suppose. So,
yes.
Sort of zoo and attractions have their own plan because that's a very specific setting. They did look at ours, and we actually worked with the Zoo Association or Zoo and Attractions. I don't remember what they're called now. It's a National Association for Zoos. And, you learn many things. I did learn in Queensland, we have, I think, 49 zoos and animal displays. Who knew?
Yeah.
I've got a few to go. I've seen quite a few, but maybe that's an opportunity for me.
A lot of koalas to get cuddling, Daniel, that's for sure.
Look, hey, I'm looking forward to a bit of cuddling, with all the social distancing. I'd be happy to cuddle a few koalas, I'm sure. So there's many zoos and attractions in Queensland, and they have their own plan now. That's an approved plan with the Queensland government to stick to, and you have obviously a few very prominent and well-established animal attractions in your region as well, obviously. So they have theirs. And more generally, very large venues like down here, the theme parks and so on, they need their own plan anyhow. I mean, if they're we're talking about, small numbers relatively compared to these major attractions who will need thousands of people to make it worthwhile opening the doors. They will need their own plans. That's pretty clear. Events, that's a whole other can of worms, so to speak. There have obviously been no events, pretty much. But we are in the process of finalizing our second effort in this whole health environment, where the government asked us to develop what we thought was going to be a plan. It's now called a framework for events. So we're working with Griffith Uni epidemiologists who are experts who knew they even existed in events, epidemiology, and disease transmission. There's people, sorts of things. So we're now working with world experts on how do you manage a disease threat at an event. And we're nearly finished with this plan. It's gone to the Chief Health Officer yesterday for approval. So I keep saying plan. It's a framework, we've been told.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen how many events can confidently shape up to go ahead under the framework, but it's a good start to get this discussion going again, because we all know that events are such an important part of tourism of all regions, events of all scales, sporting, cultural, culinary, whatever it may be. You know, we really have to get this going again. So this plan will be very important, but it will be one that has to be adjusted multiple times, I suspect. You know, even yesterday, you know, we found out that the footy will go ahead now with 2,000 spectators on the weekend. They're talking now about events for 10,000 people. So we will have to adjust that plan within the parameters that the Queensland government and the Chief Health Officer sets. But yes, it's nearly ready, and you'll be receiving it as soon as it's out the door.
That's great news, because I think particularly our region, where events is one of our key drivers up here. So I think the whole industry is looking forward to seeing some of our key events come back when the time is right. So we look forward to seeing that and appreciate you taking that one on board for the industry as well. So Daniel, with regards to, we've spoken obviously COVID safe plans, there is also something called COVID clean. Can you, I think there's some confusion maybe with the industry as to what the difference is, or whether you have to do one or both. Can you explain what a COVID clean is, and do you need to do that?
Yeah. So the tourism and the accommodation tourism plan is the translation of the government's expectations on a business. So that, as I said, that's what gives you the confidence as a business to operate, and it gives you more flexibility to operate. But you're satisfying the government. The government is implied in this. We then have your customers or your potential customers who should be told about your great management of that issue. And we have collaborated with our national colleagues, all the state and territory tourism industry councils like ours. We have a national organisation called the Australian Tourism Industry Council. And through that platform, we also, by the way, manage the tourism awards, the accreditation program, the hotel accommodation star rating system, which we own jointly with the other state industry councils. So through that vehicle, we have created a COVID clean business practicing checklist. It's an online checklist that businesses can go through. It's free at the moment. It's pretty straightforward, I should say. I was going to say it's easy, but you need to tick the boxes so that you can demonstrate that what you've done is covering all the bases. And for all Queensland access, so any business in Queensland accessing that checklist, they can be confident that the checklist matches the requirement that the government has put on you and us through the plan. I hope I explained this right. So the government expects you to do certain things. We have taken those requirements and checklisted them in this national platform. And if you go through the checklist on the online platform for the COVID clean practicing business, and you go through that checklist, it will demonstrate that you've actually complied with the plan, if that explains it right.
Yeah.
We're putting that checklist and the logo that you will be able to display if you have completed the checklist. We're promoting that nationally, and we think it'll get quite a bit of traction. So ATDW, for instance, the Australian Tourism Data Warehouse, is going to feature the logos for all the properties and experiences that have gone through the checklist. Tourism Events Queensland has promised us to make reference to it in their publications. I think it'll be important for us as individual businesses to do this, but also as destinations, you know, to promote it and reassure the customers, at least for the foreseeable future, that they'll be traveling safely.
Yeah, and absolutely. You mentioned earlier, obviously, that people are looking for that health and safety reassurance. So it's a great initiative to roll out. Do businesses, once they've done the COVID clean, and they've also, you know, referred to the guidelines that have been put out through the COVID safe plans, do they need to physically go in and do anything with like their ATDW listing or anything along those lines to be displaying that logo?
No, I think that, well, you can physically download the logo and the PDF and all of that and do what you wish with it, put it on your website and all that. But in as much as ATDW is concerned, I think that is actually sort of at the back of house. That'll be managed through the platform, which is the Quality Tourism Framework. It'll be managed automatically through that without a link to ATDW. That's certainly how it's intended to work, and I'm pretty sure it is working.
Okay, fantastic. That's great news. And I think, Tourism Events Queensland ourselves, we're looking for businesses to make sure that they're good to go, to instill the tagline with their COVID safe plans in place, and etc. as well. So, Daniel, if for some reason a business or a staff member or a customer was suspected to be ill or have the flu, are they required to shut down for the 14 days, or what actually happens if someone from your team needs to get tested, for example?
No, they don't need to shut down. There's certainly no general rule about that. God forbid if there was a major cluster outbreak, then maybe Queensland Health will come to you. But certainly just because you suspect or you detect that somebody carries the virus, you do not need to shut down, but you will have to follow certain steps. I mean, in the first instance, probably most importantly, you have to report it, to Workers' Health and Safety or to Queensland Health immediately, and don't delay and don't hope that it's going to go away, because it will come back and bite you if you do that. So report it immediately and document it as much as you can. And then there are a few steps that are actually in the plan that you'd have to follow to make sure you carry out your responsibilities. But you certainly, don't think, oh my God, I better keep it on the quiet so I don't have to shut down, because this is wrong on all fronts. Report it. You won't necessarily have to shut down or by any general rule.
And who is, I think you mentioned earlier, who is the regulating body for these COVID savers? It's all self-regulated, that's correct. But I know a lot of businesses are fearful of reopening incorrectly or making mistakes and getting huge fines. Who is managing the regulation of the industry at the moment?
Well, look, it's the government in sort of general terms. So it could be that in some places it's the police going around. We have certainly seen that. The police has been enforcing social distancing in the general community. I'm sure you've seen the media reports. So actually, the police could rock up and count numbers in your business or something like that. I think it's relatively unlikely, but possible. Also, it could be the community, the health, Queensland Health. What's it called?
The public health unit?
Thank you. Yeah. Public health unit would probably be the most obvious one, where they may come around and have a look. I don't know how stringent those inspections will be. I mean, look, theoretically, or not theoretically, in some cases, fines were imposed on people more than businesses, as far as I'm aware. I am aware that weeks ago, some businesses were threatened with fines. I'm not aware of anybody having been issued an actual fine in a business. I may be wrong on this, I don't know. But look, I think, well, I have to be careful. I'm not really going to give you advice on this. If I reflect on this, I would think you should not be too fearful as long as you intend to do the right thing. I think you have a relatively good defense, but make sure you're informed enough of what you're expected to do. It is also important that the plan and even the general health directives make it very clear that the individual who may be your customer carries a lot of responsibility themselves. So if you say to them, to your customers in a venue or in a transport vehicle, you should do, social distancing, and you then drive your bus, for argument's sake, and people cuddle up on the back seat, that's not necessarily their fault. I mean, they have their own responsibility. So if somebody would board your bus and say, what's going on here? We have 10 people sitting on top of each other. It would not, I mean, those people individually would be responsible for breaching the rules, if you like.
And I think that's a really important point, that it's, the onus isn't entirely on the business, because I think you can't, once you're out and about, you can't control every movement that someone makes, as long as you're informing them I suppose, what the expectations are, I guess. So that's an important point to give some businesses some reassurance, because I think there has been a lot of pressure placed on businesses to have all of the solutions, I suppose.
Yeah. And look, and the plan where it spells out what you, for instance, the transport operator can do as an alternative to the general distancing rules. It says things like, and I sort of paraphrase it a little bit, but you need to give your customers the possibility to distance by 1.5 meters. It doesn't actually say, when you read it, you must insist that they're socially distanced 1.5 meters. It says you should give them the opportunity wherever it's practical. So there are, look, I hate to say this, but there are weasel words, really. A little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, which is what the industry needs to reopen. So that is good news. As businesses are reopening, and if they have sort of questions around specifics as to what they can and can't do, is there a hotline or a service that businesses can reach out to?
Yes, so we've definitely handed this over back to the government. So there's COVID response helpline, a phone line, plus an email address, if you like, COVID response. That is pretty good to have what they call a tiger team, I think. They have a whole bunch of people over there that keep up to date with whatever may have changed in the from the health directive point of view, and they will have answers to all of the questions, I hope.
Yeah, that's the 13 COVID. Is that the correct number?
Correct. Yes.
No, that's right. Just wanted to double check that I had the right number as well.
Yes.
And Daniel, obviously we're moving through the roadmap as such, and the next stage is the 10th of July. What's the COVID safe plans that QTIX have put out? Is that an evolving document like the roadmap as well, that as things progress and restrictions are lifted, that got those guidelines change as well? Or do you envision that we're kind of stuck with these guidelines for quite some time?
No, I think if the general guidelines change on numbers, probably numbers will change first before any social distancing will change. We would adjust the document, absolutely. I think, on numbers we can expect movement. The social distancing will be something we'll be dealing with for a while, I suspect, and certainly the hygiene measures will be there for a while. But so we will adjust it, absolutely. If there's more flexibility offered by the government, we will build this into the document or adjust it or take things out. That will definitely happen.
Yeah, okay, that's great news. I might throw down to some of the questions that have come through from industry, if that's okay. And please, I'll reiterate to the attendees today, please pop any questions into the chat there so that we can have them answered as they come through as well. So the first one, and I know this was a hot topic in the creation of the actual plan, and you did allude to it earlier on, but what is the exact seating requirements for buses and boats? Do they have to be 1.5 metres apart, or can they leave simply a seat between? What would be your recommendation as part of that guideline?
Well, I think you need to look at the actual words in the document, and they give you, like I said, quite a lot of flexibility. So it doesn't say specifically you have to have an empty seat. It gives you the opportunity to accommodate effectively, when you read the document really and interpret the document effectively, 1 person per 2 square meters, roughly. If you stick to the 1.5 meter distancing rule, but the rule, for instance, can be breached if you have a family. So if a family, they can sit together, they can cuddle each other, for instance. So that gives you obviously more capacity. You have your family of 6 showing up, that's like 1 unit. So there is a lot of flexibility in there. So you really have to read the plan carefully to make the most use for your specific circumstance. And as I said, it suggests you give people the opportunity to socially distance. So they can go, maybe if it's a bus, you can't go outside, but if it's a boat, you can go outside or to the outside deck, for instance. So there's all kinds of alternatives that are suggested for you to apply for your specific circumstance.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So the next one that we've got here, and you may not have the answer to this one, I certainly don't, but it would be interesting to know, do we have any insight into stage 4 or 5 of what the roadmap looks like? And is that when we may see social distancing restrictions sort of starting to lift a bit more?
Look, I can't tell you really.
Yeah.
Nobody probably can. I don't think even the Prime Minister could tell you this. They're obviously, and I don't mean this in a negative way, they're making this up as they go along. And, we're finding out new things even from a health perspective. I was watching the media last couple of days, and suddenly masks are now considered something that we should have done or might have done, when previously, certainly the last few months, as far as I'm aware, everybody said, well, masks are pointless, unless the disease, it certainly doesn't protect you from catching it. Suddenly they're talking about masks. So things are changing constantly. So stage 4 and 5 and beyond, I have no idea. I mean, there'll hopefully be some significant easing of restrictions, and the whole paradigm will shift from, the flattening the curve, which is now flat, to outbreak management potentially, because I foresee that there will be clusters of outbreaks every now and then, I imagine, as there are now in Victoria, for instance. So there'll be more a focus of managing that. So the whole tracing thing will be an ongoing topic, I suspect. The app didn't quite work the way they thought, so they're thinking of other ways of tracing people, and it has a role. You know that in the plan you will need to keep track of your customers, so you need to be able to reestablish who was in contact with whom. So I think that's sort of an enduring thing for some time. And certainly the hygiene measures will be an enduring thing. So look, I don't know. I mean, we're obviously hoping to get back to some sort of normality and some
Absolutely.
as soon as we can.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned the COVID Safe app. Are we still encouraging people to download that app, or is that sort of...
Yeah, look, I'm a bit hesitant to make comment, but I think the official line is they're still encouraging people to download the app.
Yeah.
Clearly, there have been questions raised about, is it because of the insufficiently high take-up of the app, is it even offering any benefit? And then there's also been all sorts, and I only know this from the media, I don't know some inside information, that the efficacy and the capability of the app to actually achieve what it set out to do is under some question, as far as I understand.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. So I have got quite a number of questions that have come through about events, which I'm assuming would be answered once we have those events guidelines. Is there a time frame on when we're likely to have those, Daniel?
Look, I'm hoping to have a final draft. We're waiting for the comments from the Chief Health Officer at the moment. Yeah. So it'll be, I hope, early next week we'll have something out the door that can be actually shared.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure that we share that through to our members as well once we get our hands on it also. So I think they're probably the main questions that have been coming through. So I suppose, Daniel, if anyone else has other questions to pop into that chat box, please do feel free to do so now. Otherwise, was there anything else that you wanted to sort of raise or mention as a part of this COVID safe process for our local businesses that we can pass on as well?
Look, I mean, I said before, I think we'll have to grapple with the reality that we'll have to adjust our business practices to deal with a more health and hygiene conscious clientele. I think it's a reality, no matter what the government says or does, and when the restrictions ease, that's something we'll just have to build into our businesses. I have no doubt about that. Look, beyond that, I mean, if I can make a general comment, I think the COVID situation has been the absolute mother of all disruptions. We've had disruptions all over the place for many years, and Townsville is well aware of that, with floods and cyclones and droughts affecting your hinterland. And, so it's not as if we're not used to disruption, let alone the external disruptions, trade and economic collapses and whatnot. But this COVID thing was absolutely a nuclear bomb in terms of disruption. But like all disruptions, we should at some point really flip to the opportunity side of it. We're dealing with the crisis, and that's a priority, and we're dusting ourselves off. and some businesses are really hanging on by their fingernails at the moment. I'm very aware of that. But there is a sort of a transition to the opportunity part of that. And like all disruptions, there are opportunities. You know, I think clearly in the domestic market, tourism market, you know, there's a hungry audience, I think, that wants to get out there and maybe is more focused than ever on the unique regional attractions and destinations that we have in Queensland, and we have a wealth of them. And look, I think places like Townsville, and without being you know, negative about it, that's not necessarily seen as a prime holiday destination by many Queenslanders. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. But I think this situation will challenge all Queenslanders and maybe all Australians to kind of look at this map of Australia and go, well, where have I actually not been? Or where are things that I hear people talking about, whether that's, you know, Maggie Island or your wetlands or the underwater artworks that you now have, or the museum in Townsville or Reef HQ. They suddenly may think, wait a minute, I want to go not to the holiday destination I've known all my life in Queensland. I want to actually go to somewhere I haven't thought of before.
Absolutely. We're an emerging destination and we've got some opportunities to leverage from at the back of this. That's
I really,
a very good point.
Really believe that, you know, and we are we all have had a disruption to our lives, you know, and many of us, maybe all of us, come out of this thinking, well, you know, I mean, I don't really need a bigger car. I need to do something that I'm actually going to remember as an experience. So I'm going to take my kids somewhere, or I'm going to take my partner somewhere, or take myself somewhere to, you know, connect with these great destinations we have in Queensland. So I think there is a bit of a silver lining out there, you know, for operators right around the state. So I'm banking on it.
Yeah, we're all looking towards that light at the end of the tunnel that we were speaking about earlier, Daniel. Absolutely. I have had 2 questions come through, and then we might wrap it up. But one question has come through from a hotel operator that was asking if you've got a pool and a gym and a restaurant, and then also the rooms, do we fit under the one COVID safe plan that you've put out, or is there do they have to access the fitness COVID safe plan and the pools and all of the different ones that come?
Yeah, no, that is a complication that we didn't really think would arise in this way, because we thought the one plan would cover all, but it wasn't to be like that. So what I would suggest to you, to the person who's asked the question, is that you do actually consult those, say the gym plan and the restaurant plan, because the specific circumstances of serving meals or using gym equipment are addressed in those plans. So for your own peace of mind, I would look at those plans and just sort of cut and paste, if you like, into your overall approach, those elements as well. That's what I mean.
Good advice, good advice. And I have had a question come through as well. Does a bunk bed constitute as an adequate barrier? I'm assuming from maybe a local backpacker hostel. Would that be, like, with regards to sharing multiple, the types of accommodation where multiple people are sharing the one room, is there any complexities around that?
I can't answer that question, I'm sorry.
That would be one for the 13 COVID number, I think, maybe?
Yeah, probably. I haven't slept in a bunk bed in a while. So. But look, it's a fair enough question. I mean, it's obviously a very, very, sort of prominent, popular sort of circumstance for many backpacker places. So yeah, look, I can't answer that off the top of my head.
No, that's fine. And I will reiterate that 13 COVID number for anyone that does have any specific questions related to your business as well. But also feel free to pick up the phone to us here at Townsville Enterprise, and we can try and direct you in the right direction as well to the relevant people to answer any of those specific questions too. Daniel, thank you so much for your time. I must say you've been very accommodating of your time during this crisis, and you've been a great support to myself and to the rest of the tourism community here in Townsville. So thank you. Keep fighting the good fight for the industry, because we need people like you in our corner. So thank you very much for your time today, and I'm sure, no doubt, we'll be seeing you in a Zoom chat some point soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa, and hopefully you don't just see me in a Zoom chat, but
yes.
Very very soon.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for tuning in today. We will be posting this on our website to reference later or to share with any of the other industry that couldn't make it today. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.